All right. It's been requested many, many times to bring back the worst of the CBC. And now Wyatt Claypool is in town to help us cover the protest tomorrow and Saturday. But right now, you're going to watch both of us lose our goddamn minds as we live watch last night's The National, CBC The National, and give live commentary on just how bad the CBC is. This is, for those who don't know, the CBC is Canada's national broadcaster, so we pay $1.4 billion in taxes to keep this abomination running.
Hey, they still get $300 million in ad revenue.
Oh, yes. What a functioning, thriving business this is. And they come in and they, well, you're going to see what they do. So we're going to play it, and we'll give you live commentary as we go now to Ian Hennemanson.
It's already bad. Oh, goodness.
Crisis in the Middle East deepens. I mean, it's a war. We're just pretending that like there's not going to be a war. All right, at least they're showing. Okay, they showed the Hamas massacre.
Okay, I'm going to predict that they're just going to have a really oddly high amount of focus on Gaza. It's the only thing that's happened in Israel.
Probably. All right, evacuations, how incompetent the Canadian government is, and just asleep at the wheel, like Afghanistan again.
Because my husband's family are all here, and we know that we're leaving them behind.
Oh God, Chantal Herbert and Rosemary Barden.
Oh, we couldn't talk about a major international issue without having two people who know nothing about it commentating.
I had no idea what to grab.
Ooh, I think we might get some climate talk propaganda. This is going to be a good one, guys.
Every single time we've done this together, I think we've done 3 of these, they've just had random climate stories.
Relentlessly bombed. In the words of one UN official, the situation in the tiny, densely populated territory is approaching a huge disaster.
So already they're pushing the Hamas narrative, tiny, densely populated. There's 2 million people in Gaza. That sounds like a lot, but there's 3 million people in Toronto.
Well, and the thing is, it's
Gaza's
not
bigger
just
than Toronto.
Gaza City. Everyone pretends like it's just the city. There's still outside areas.
There's still rural areas here.
It'd be like if it was Calgary plus, 10 kilometers on either side.
Surpassing 1,300, more than 1,000 of them civilians. The shock and anguish overwhelming. Paul Hunter is in Jerusalem for us again tonight, and Paul, the violence.
Let's see what he says.
Continues. Yeah, Ian, we spent the day about 5 kilometers from the border with Gaza, where you can see and feel and hear that bombardment constantly. And just a warning, some of these visuals are quite graphic.
I don't know why they say that about buildings being taken.
Yeah, this is not
bad.
Yeah,
but it's not also, wait. Isn't it telling though that the reporters in Jerusalem reporting on Gaza not because it's dangerous in Gaza, they can find them safe areas. It's because you'd probably get killed in Gaza.
Yeah.
By Hamas.
And children caught in this quickly spiraling war. There are now so many bodies in Gaza, they're running out of places to bury them. There's no room in cemeteries, he says. So graves are dug randomly near houses on donated.
Well, there's a kid smiling beside this guy giving commentary, by the way. There's a lot of smiling kids in this thing, which that was interesting. Just smiling kids while he's talking about how terrible it is.
I'm sorry, but also they're talking about these are horrific.
So they're talking. At least they mentioned the hostages, but they didn't mention Canadian hostages. Interesting.
Today, fresh images of another community, Holit, where Israel says Hamas militants rampage, destroy.
Hamas militants.
No, also, notice they said it's because Israel said there was a horrific massacre, or did the journalists show up on the ground and there was just bodies there and blood everywhere? I'm pretty sure they didn't flipping fake it. Just good, whatever.
And again, they're calling them militants, not terrorists. The Canadian government has Hamas listed as a terrorist organization. This is the Canadian government channel who, if you're not following, they put out a directive saying you're not allowed to call them terrorists.
They said people have different definitions of what a terrorist is, and it's too political to call it a terrorist. Killing women and children might be actually freedom fighter stuff. I don't know what about you. That's freedom fighter crap in my book, is killing random people.
Who hasn't decapitated a baby or two?
Found their targets in Israel, with Israelis now increasingly angry that their country could be caught so off guard Today, an acknowledgement from the military. The Israeli army said its chief of staff did not meet its responsibility for security. We will learn, he said, and investigate. But now it is time for war. On that, the expectation still, a ground assault will soon follow. Meanwhile, the Israeli army today took a handful of journalists to one of the places in southern Israel where the Hamas attacks began, just a handful of kilometers from Gaza, the site of that music festival. CBC News was among those allowed in today to walk among the wreckage left in place and to consider the near unimaginable.
I'm gonna guess too, if the Israeli military didn't not make them, but didn't specifically say, "Hey, come and see the killing fields with us," they wouldn't have done it. They would have just reported with B-roll from other people and not actually experienced it.
Well, they did the smart thing of saying only a select few. So then the journalists wanted to go because there was some limited capability. It's a clever way of tricking the CBC into doing their job.
What is extra striking when you are here is the scale of it. It goes on like this and on and on and on and on. There were so many people here. Massacre.
Notice a little bottom text that says 8 groups warn of disaster in Gaza as bombings continue. Again, there's just the zero context. It would be like in World War II, the German government, Germany, bombed Britain, and then they bombed Germany back, and then you just had wall-to-wall reports on how bad it was in Germany.
Yeah, pretty much what it is.
Sirens and artillery fire could be heard in the near distance.
Paul, yours was the first Canadian news crew allowed into the site of that festival. What struck you about what you saw?
I think it was because all the cars were all in crazy directions in the middle of fields and just everywhere, trying to get away when people were shot and killed. Because you could, as you stood there, you could feel the panic and you could feel the fear. And I think that's what struck me most. You could feel the hopelessness. And I don't think I'll ever forget.
I mean,
Paul Hunter's fine. I wouldn't blame that guy.
No, he's not. It's the editorial influence that you're sensing here. Oh, Adrian Arsenault. This should get worse.
Yeah, absolutely, Ian. I think the phenomenon of the reservists on the move is enormous. For the first time, for example, the first time in 40 years, the national airline El Al is flying on Shabbat. That's because they want to bring home Jewish reservists urgently. Look at that stretch of cars in Israel's south. Vehicles of reservists. They park, then they bolt to a base to get ready for a fight. 360,000 so far, the biggest, fastest call-up in history here. For them, this seems nothing less than an existential battle.
This is home. We have to protect it. That's the only home the Jewish people have. Without it, every Jew in the entire world is just in danger.
Waiting for orders, while above, airstrikes in Gaza grow in ferocity. Every Hamas member is a dead man, said the Prime Minister. That's a vow that comes from rage. This is what the buildup of tanks and armaments looks like on the border. Israel has the might, but Hamas controls Gaza and its tunnels. It claims it planned for the attacks back in 2022, so it will have prepared for an Israeli ground invasion as well. And as the military and first responders have come across the bodies of attackers, some claim to have seen evidence of that planning. I posted images of improvised explosive devices, rocket launchers, and allegedly meticulous plans and layouts of the kibbutzes. That's chilling. If these images ultimately prove accurate, Israeli intelligence will have much to learn from them. Right now, the learnings are all about sheer brutality.
Yossi, what was today like for you?
It was a really rough day.
Yossi Landau, the commander of a rescue unit called Zaka. We caught him at the end of his shift after tending to bodies in the houses of an attack kibbutz. He can't escape the images or the feeling that this moment is a terrible turning point.
I imagine every room is something that frightens you to go into.
No, I look for the mirror first. Before I go in, I look for a mirror to see if I'm normal.
Right. We might have to do that for a long time.
Hopefully not.
That's the grief and the rage that courses through this wounded country, and it's the momentum behind what may be coming.
Adrian, watching to see if that ground invasion happens.
I mean, you kind of see them laying the groundwork for it's all justified, but in 2 weeks, when the war starts, we're gonna start to say, oh, did they go too far?
Well, I can see this laying the ground where like they're so angry and they don't know what they're doing, so there's blind rage or something like that against Gaza.
Yeah.
What happens to those people who cannot get out?
And as you look back at this long, intense week, what kind of is notable to you?
I guess a lot of things strike me. I still can't believe the scale of what we're talking about.
Notice how we still haven't used the word terrorism at all. It's just horrific stuff going on, the scale of it all. And it's like,
This is like a lot of stuff I hate about geopolitical analysis that's so bad. It's like escalation, de-escalation. There's a thing, and there's like terms and like you could hear the terms from the think tanks and the whatever.
Because when you talk about
it's not just
terrorism is the first thing that comes to mind, and they just can't use the word for some reason.
Terrifying for people in Gaza. An estimated 2.3 million living in an area about the size of Montreal. And as Ellen Morrow shows us, people there are running out of
Gaza's not the size of Montreal.
medicine and time.
There might be Gaza City, but again, Gaza Strip is not the size of Montreal. Montreal is not 42 kilometers long.
Yeah, like the actual area. Like,
Again,
it would
so-
take you in a day to walk across Gaza.
This is again the propaganda where they're pretending that Gaza City is all of Gaza, and they're putting all of Gaza's population into, the
It's like
land
saying
mass of Gaza City, when that's not true. Like, again, there are rural areas in Gaza.
It's like saying, Calgary has 1.3 million people living in this area, and they only show like the metro area, or not the metro. They only show the urban area, not the metro.
Yeah.
Hundreds of civilians, at least 500 children, says Gaza's Ministry of Health.
Gaza's Ministry of Health is Hamas, by the way.
And that's not like Hamas is so tied
And
into
not
the
to
country,
say
it's
that they're
literally they're elected.
And I'm not going to deny that innocent children are going to die in this war, and I don't want them to, and they shouldn't. But again, they're being warned to evacuate. Israel's telling them where they're going to bomb, and Hamas militants or terrorists are keeping them in at gunpoint or through disinformation. So
We're homeless, we're destroyed, this man says. We don't know where to go. Israel has blocked off supplies of food and clean water as part of what it calls a complete siege.
Sure. That's also even just saying it makes it sound like blocked off water and electricity. It wasn't blocked off.
They stopped giving it.
Because they were the ones providing them water and electricity despite all the terrorist attacks. And the whole point is that Hamas, the government in Gaza, not just a group that happens to be in Gaza, the government of Gaza used all of the water piping given to them by Germany and other aid groups that they could have used to pump their own water and get their own water. They could invest all the money they have into desalination plants and other things.
The Israelis have offered them desalination tech.
Yeah,
They
they've
said
not. No. Nope. They do. They turned all the water piping they got into missiles, and again,
because they knew they could, because the Israelis would always give them water and energy to avoid being criticized in the international community. And then the war started, a war, and you're not getting free. Sorry, there's no country if the Nazis rolled into Europe. Do you think the British, after declaring war on the Germans, would just say, "Oh yeah, by the way, here's all your fuel you need to power your tanks to help you push through the Ardennes"? Because listen, if you're not able to properly invade France and us, I mean, that would be a war crime. This is preposterous, yes.
And the other thing too is there's literally an interview of a Hamas official on RT Russia Today where they just admit that they don't actually help their own people, and that the Israelis are foolish enough to think that they were spending their money on anything but weapons.
It's getting from very, very down to much, much worse very, very quickly. And so we need to be able to.
So the UN, they're taking to the UN now. Remember, the UN in Gaza, the UN schools have been used as weapon stockpiling sites. Tunnels have been built under them. And if you've seen like the video going around of the UNRWA schools now, it's a documentary from years ago, but you can see what the UN teaches, right? The UN in Gaza, your tax dollars. So if you're Canadian, Americans aside, but most Westerners, Canadians especially, your tax dollars don't go to Israel. We don't fund Israel. We have trade deals, but that means like they have microchips and we buy them, and we have wheat and they buy them. That's trade. We only give free money to Hamas through the United Nations and through charities.
And again, like those UNRWA schools, the reason why they're so bad is because they literally allow the Palestinian Authority, Fatah, to do all the teaching. It's not like the
And
UN
Hamas.
teachers are coming in with a UN curriculum, which wouldn't be good on its face. But it's just like, no, it's terrorism curriculum. That's
No,
okay.
you look at the textbooks they have in the UN schools in the Palestinian territories. Tell me if that's not a problem.
Israelis captured in the weekend's brutality. Egypt may help facilitate aid getting in over its border with Gaza.
They're not. They literally closed their border gates.
Oh, yeah, just explain the Egypt thing. So yeah, Egypt can give aid anytime they want. So they control a part of the border. Egypt closed the border crossing. They do not want any Palestinians in their territory. Hamas is Muslim Brotherhood. Many Palestinians are Muslim Brotherhood. Sisi had to fight off Mohammed Morsi, who was going to Islamize and be a Muslim Brotherhood country. So Sisi's main rival internally is the Muslim Brotherhood, and he does not want to import hundreds of thousands of Muslim Brotherhood supporters who would be fanatical to his country because it would destabilize Egypt. So that's something no one ever talks about as well, is like, why doesn't any Arab country, I mean, Qatar, how many refugees are you going to take here? Pakistan? Huh? How many Palestinians are you going to take? Pakistan? Right? Turkey? How many?
That means the civilians of Gaza remain trapped, fearing what's to come. Ellen Morrow, CBC News, Toronto.
The safe passage of civilians came up at a meeting with the U.S. Secretary of State. Anthony Blinken arrived in Tel Aviv earlier today, and as Katie Simpson tells us, he described graphic images of the atrocities Israel says Hamas committed.
Why did they just say Israel?
Israel says Hamas, the atrocities Israel says Hamas committed. They live streamed it, you ding-dongs.
Think about it this way, too. There are reporters in Canada who will go up to Pierre Poilievre and say, you're dog whistling to the far right. They're not even just saying some people say. They'll eventually jump to the some people say when he says who's claiming this. But like as soon as it's like literally Hamas coming in and murdering people and live streaming it, it's like, well, Israel says they killed them. We don't know. We don't do research here at the CBC. What are you talking about? This is ridiculous. Hamas? Oh, you mean that charity group? We're not going to say terrorists.
As he met with volunteers at a donation center. Among them, survivors of the music festival attack, whose loved ones are being held captive by Hamas.
First priority for our friends and family that are now in Gaza. We're strong here, we're powerful here, in this place, now in Tel Aviv and everywhere.
The usually restrained diplomat offered what comfort he could.
Yeah, he also gave $6 billion to Iran.
Yeah, this is partially his fault. Blinking's a ding-dong. Where's Robert Malley right now?
Prime Minister and I discussed how Israel does this matters.
While Anthony Blinken called for precautions to protect civilians, the Israeli Prime Minister warned of difficult days ahead.
And they did give precautions. They're giving warning. They gave a one-day warning to civilians.
Well, that's why they didn't even cut off water and electricity right as the attacks are happening. They effectively let them store up some water if they needed to. It was obvious it was going to get cut off.
Photos and videos of atrocities carried out by Hamas.
It's hard to find the right words.
It is actually kind of easy. Terrorism, Anthony.
Yeah.
Terrorism.
Well, he had to say it's difficult to find words, so the CBC didn't have him say terrorism.
Riddled with bullets. Soldiers beheaded.
American officials are facing questions about some claims after the president said he'd personally seen confirmed images of beheaded children, even though he had not. The White House later said he was referring to news reports, dismissing the concerns, urging the public to brace for more brutality.
That there's going to be additional gruesome images.
It seems like the CBC is literally 24 hours behind. I know we're watching last night's, and even by last night, it was already confirmed that the beheading babies thing actually did happen.
Yeah.
CBC News, Washington.
Canada is promising $10 million
Oh,
in
great.
humanitarian assistance to address what it calls the urgent needs stemming from the crisis. Some other nations have already started sending supplies. Global Affairs.
Let's be very honest, that $10 million is not going to southern Israel in any great part. It's mostly going to be going to Gaza. And again, giving any money to Gaza would be like giving money to a children's charity or an aid charity in Nazi Germany in World War II.
All right, so I'm going to say something that will be cut up and used against me on alt-right Telegram channels that hate me anyway. But The thing with the aid is, if you want this to end quickly, you have to understand it's a war, and wars someone needs to win. The best case scenario for the civilians of Gaza is a quick and effective end to the war. In order to facilitate that, the siege should be effective. That's a hard thing to say. But if there's an ineffective siege where the world's just going to keep bringing in supplies and supplies and supplies, it's going to keep Hamas in power longer and longer and longer and more entrenched, and it's going to cause more war and more brutality and more bombings. The best way to end this would be an effective siege, which causes the population to turn on Hamas. Hamas is not the full ruler. To know anything about the conflict, a lot of the areas in the different cities and towns are administered by different militias or tribal families. They have significant amount of power in the Gaza Strip and in the West Bank. If there is enough infighting caused by an effective siege where you have the militant wings turning on the terrorists, then you could see an end to the siege. You could see a situation in which some sort of leadership could emerge that could have some sort of tentative peace with Israel, and Palestinians could have some sort of self-sufficiency. That is the best long-term scenario for everyone. So when lefties and media experts and people just want to bemoan how evil it is and show their virtue and do this and undermine the siege effort, you're going to get a longer, more brutal war. You will cause more people to die. And that's a hard thing to do because it requires some thinking. It requires some knowledge of history. It requires some, cause and effect thoughts. And I get that's difficult if you're on, the alt-right Telegram channels, or if you have a master's degree in foreign policy from a Canadian university. But these are things you need to think of.
For those who are on board, mixed emotions. Relief they're getting to safety, but concern for those left behind.
Now to a story of Canadian incompetence. We can't have the CBC without ineffectively covering for the Liberals' ineffectiveness.
This couple is still absorbing the shock.
I honestly think of it as like a horror film. I don't think of this as real life. The first time I heard one of the sirens, I was in shock. I didn't really understand what was going on.
For hundreds of Canadians trying to leave, this is a welcome sight.
Oh my goodness, thank you.
Their first sign of home after days of turmoil.
My greatest hope is that a week from now, people will think this was totally unnecessary and they shouldn't have left.
More international airlines have suspended flights to and from Tel Aviv, leaving crowds at the airport, and despite about 1,600 people asking Canada for help.
Departure of the Canadians. They've opened up the gate for us on the 3rd floor.
Ottawa now says it will keep flights running at least twice a day until every Canadian who wants out gets out.
We're not doing anything permanent yet.
Shirley Simon wasn't planning on leaving. Her family has lived in Israel for more than 10 years.
We're leaving my husband behind, which is the hardest part.
She's decided to take her kids back to family in the Toronto area.
This is not anything that we've ever had in the past. Nothing like this has ever happened, and it scares you to your core that it's even an option.
It's gonna be scarier when she finds out all the terrorist supporters that live in Toronto.
Yeah, I mean,
To about 100. But unless a humanitarian
see how the day of jihad is coming.
They say there's nothing they can do.
We are working very hard with all of our allies and friends and partners who want to see peace returned to the region.
We also talked about India and security, security issues and the rule of law.
It's helping passengers find hotels and book Air Canada flights home at their own expense. The first is expected to land on Friday afternoon in Toronto. Kate McKenna, CBC News, Ottawa.
A former Hamas leader has called for a day of action on Friday.
Day of action. It was a day of anger.
Yeah.
This is a jihad. This is the friggin' CBC. This is what. No, don't pause it. I'm not even listening. I'm just ranting over Ian Hanamansing right now. It's a friggin' day of anger and a call to jihad from a listed terrorist organization. A day of action. Let's watch this.
Our communities have spoken clearly that they don't feel safe, and we are being responsive.
At least they're covering it last night. Day of action. Day of anger. A jihadi day of anger. Come on, guys. This is the CBC.
And again, they still don't recognize that it's a day of anger called on by a terrorist group, Hamas. It's Hamas called for a day of action. What kind of action?
Resist together
Mayor Bunchville. Listen, there's been a spike in anti-Semitic attacks all over these cities, and none of these politicians have done anything yet. Let's see if they do anything today.
Back in Toronto, police arrested 3 men. The hate crime unit now investigating after alleged threats outside of a Jewish school.
I hope tomorrow will be an opportunity.
Alleged threat? Okay, my cousin works there. There were threats. There's eyewitnesses. They were arrested. Alleged.
The only thing that could be alleged is, was it like a prank call or something?
No,
That would
they
be
showed
it.
they showed
I know
up.
that
They
you're-
showed up. They were there.
I know it's real, but my point is like, there's nothing that can be alleged. Everything's alleged unless you can like make a rumor about a conservative. Then it's just true.
Yeah.
Toronto police, he says, fear and anxiety are warranted.
Oh, that's my old school.
Counseling resiliency.
You don't cower.
Jared Grover.
Stand up to bullies.
Good. I like him.
Sending my children to school tomorrow. I have young children in Jewish day schools. I'm encouraging my friends to send their children to school.
The same concern in Muslim communities.
Oh yeah, same concern in Muslim communities because the Jews called for a global day of jihad against them.
Be protected because you simply.
NCCM? NCCM called it.
Yeah, basically a douchebag's talking on TV right now.
It's not comforting. It's unfathomable. It shouldn't be happening.
So this is an organization that supported the violence against Israel at the beginning, and then blamed them.
Basically
and-
said nothing about anything until Gaza started getting hit by rockets.
No.
The federal government has weighed in on the conflict, and as we mentioned, pledged humanitarian aid.
Israel has the right to defend itself.
But is Ottawa doing enough? Rosie's here with that issue.
Before we get to Rose,
As Canada faces more extreme weather.
we're in like a
I have to
little
do a
bit of
podcast later, so we can't pause. We have to push through.
CBC Marketplace puts households.
Also, it's just startling how little content the CBC has to talk about. It's like that when we did it the last time I was here, and they talked about the Pope and Indigenous people meeting.
Oh yeah.
Like
I said
five
five
times.
times. It
Because
isn't
even
it?
right now, we're like 20 minutes into the news or so, like 23 minutes in, and we've talked about like nothing.
Yeah, like it's the other thing. It's like
When I say we
There's
talked
no
about nothing,
depth.
I mean like you could cover this in 5 minutes.
Yeah,
I
you
mean,
can
you
cover
could have
this.
been snappy and been, but like the thing is that they do these setups where they show the journalist looking at their laptop, talking to someone who really only has like maybe 10 seconds of like content. But this is what $1.3 billion a year pays for. It's just kind of coverage.
Well, now we're getting some climate fear porn, so this should be good.
Emergency preparedness expert Jeff Donaldson. Hello, I'm Travis from Marketplace. On goal to see if people are prepared to leave at a moment's notice. From Hurricane Fiona last year to Lee just last month, Nova Scotia knows the wrath Mother Nature can bring. We've given these households 5 minutes to get what they need and get out.
Passports.
Grabbed a lot of
I feel like this is a national news story. Like goodness, this should be on CBC New Brunswick.
They did really well. The reality of preparedness is we work towards 2 scenarios. People who prepare for a power outage and evacuation. This family didn't fare as well.
I feel like I was quite chaotic because I had no idea what to grab.
That was not the case in this household. They did exceptionally well. You hit all of the main categories. Look here. Oh, this is my emergency kit. Okay.
Okay, this isn't actually that bad. I mean, this is just like a
My
very.
point is, I don't know.
yeah.
This is national news. I mean,
Like, yeah, this is like.
Fox or CNN in the U.S. was just covering like here in Nevada. We just
But like, okay, yeah, this is how you like bury the news in Canada. You do boring stuff like this. Like we have an emergency preparedness expert go around and talk to families. Like, do you have a lot of food stored up? Yes, we do. Do you have a lot of food? No, we don't. Oh my god! But like at
This
the
should
time,
be like an article.
this should be an article.
I
so
guarantee it is
listen,
an article too.
Listen, you did the Israel-Palestine shtick. Good. Okay, you covered that. But we have a diplomatic war with India. We have actual we have the government censorship stuff. The
We
bill
have- well,
C11,
And
C18.
this was remember the thing was breaking yesterday. We have the ArriveCan scandal where they
Yes.
got like $16 million or $50 million to make a broken app that they knew was broken. That wasn't yearly. That was way too much money to spend. And now the government's investigating the company they gave the money to, not themselves for giving that much money.
Exactly. Right. So again, there's real things, but here we have experts.
And you can watch the full Marketplace investigation on their season premiere this Friday.
Dude, that's a season
So-
premiere of a show. That's the most CBC gem show you've ever heard. We're just gonna go around talking about emergency preparedness for 60 minutes.
Oh, Taylor Swift. Very important news.
But for studios, they're making bad blood. And Rosie's here with At Issue.
Hey, Dan, good to see you. Any
Uh,
this weekend?
Ian should have just been like, it's horrible to see you. I'm scared.
All right, we have lefty, crazy lefty, and new guy who I've not seen before.
Experienced firsthand, Taylor Swift's concert tour was an almost impossible ticket.
Are we gonna skip this?
Yeah, I'm gonna swip.
I'm not gonna say that's like not something that you can cover on the national news because it's like it's big entertainment news or whatever. So I won't hurt them for that, but we're gonna skip this.
As to spoilers for fans hoping to see Swift
I don't care.
89 cents, a cheeky wrap.
Okay, news.
Issue this week, Canada's response after Hamas's murderous attacks in Israel.
At least they said murderous. They can't still say terrorist.
Yeah.
But if terrorist is too political, why can they say murderous? No, I mean, it's just plain word games.
It's word games because they're corrupted by the international left, which is in bed with Hamas. You know.
Palestinian and Israelis, and ensure that as many civilians as possible are kept safe during this terrible.
I don't want to be too much of a stickler, but I find you can always tell it's a lefty publication whenever they always list Gaza or Palestinians before Israel or Israelis. It's just something that they seem to always do.
It is not an activist organization. It is surely not the government. It is a sadistic, demonic, genocidal, terrorist death.
Guys, a terrorist was set on the CBC, and Pierre Poilievre had to break in to do it. He probably had to edit that clip himself.
Yeah, he had to send.
Oh my goodness, it's Rosemary Barton.
Okay, brace yourself, team.
Hundreds of Canadians out and send millions of humanitarian aid into the region. What to make of the government's response so far? I'm Rosemary Barton. We're going to break it all down. Chantal Hubert, Althea Raj, and Andrew Coyne tonight. Thank you all for being here.
All right, at least there's no Andrew Coyne.
Can Chantal Hubert get a decent setup?
No, she can't.
She looks like she's at a coffee shop.
I think it was a no-brainer that the Conservatives and the Liberals, at least initially, would be on the same page. And on support for Israel, I don't see that consensus within the two parties.
Oh, she is in probably a hotel.
I think on the operation of bringing Canadians home, we've just done the easy part, which is getting people out of Tel Aviv. On both counts, we've done the easy part. Getting people out of Gaza is going to be a major logistical, not challenge, but nightmare.
Getting people out of Gaza and bringing them to Canada. Yes, this is who we want. Unvetted Palestinian terrorists coming into Canada.
And sorry, how many Canadian citizens are in Gaza? Also, if you're Canadian, if you were kidnapped from Israel, yes, we should try and move heaven and earth to get you out of there. But if you're a Canadian citizen who's living in Gaza, voluntarily moved there, I would question your motives. And if you're not a Canadian citizen who live in Gaza, why is it our responsibility to do anything about this?
Isn't it an open air prison? Like, why are you spending time there? You're a Canadian citizen. Get out. Jailbreak.
Althea, was it? I guess it wasn't surprising to you either, but the language from the two leaders there would be so similar, and the position would be so similar.
Well, it's not similar. The position.
No, it's not surprising. I think there's a.
I'm sorry, but also we're doing now a talk show kind of segment right after we already talked about these issues barely. And now they're like, can you kind of contrast the way the two leaders are talking about it? You've played the same 5-second clip of Trudeau talking, and then you played a 7-second clip of Pierre talking. We do not have enough content here to speak.
I know in international law, you're not supposed to target civilians. Israel decides, as it has, to block food.
It didn't block food.
Not supply. It's not blocking food. It's not supplying food.
Yeah.
A situation that is catastrophic in Gaza.
She's just lying.
Is that following
international law? No, anyone who said, listen, if anyone brings up international law in this conflict, the translation is, I know nothing about what international law means. It's also a joke, international law itself.
Today was a very clear distinction that he was trying to do between what Hamas is and what it is not.
We're not going to say what it is because we might have to use the word terrorist.
From other political leaders as well, especially because this is such a sensitive issue for so many Canadians and expat communities here, with the possible backlash and protests that we might see tomorrow, and possibly in the days and weeks ahead as well. I agree with Chantal on the deportation record. I should say that decades ago now, I used to work in consular affairs, so I think I probably have more pragmatic view than most people who are itching to leave an international conflict zone, because I have lived it on the other side. I don't know how Canada gets its own citizens out of Gaza. It will be, frankly, I think, entirely dependent on what the Americans are able to support and who can pull back on anything that they get. I'll just leave it there. So Jason,
That was absolute nothing for 3 minutes.
There's nothing. If he said, "Oh, it's a sensitive issue," how we describe Hamas, because of all the expat communities and things. Oh, someone might be hurt if you call the people who are burning civilians alive, raping people on top of the dead bodies of their friends before executing them and decapitating babies. Some people might get hurt if you call them terrorists. Let's see this new guy.
Very much in peril at this point. Egypt and the U.S. will take a lead. UN will take a lead. Even the federal government makes no bones about that. They say this is really up to UN. We will support UN.
Oh, the UN will come in.
Look this guy up. I think I know him.
It's not surprising to hear Justin Trudeau and Pierre Poilievre call.
We've just had 3 people in a row saying it's not surprising. Yes, we're always going to have a lot of unity in situations like this.
This is nothing commentary. Like, it's not even like
don't
the anti-Israel bias. It's not even the anti-Israel bias that drives me crazy right now. Like, that's baked in. I've known that for years. I've lived it. It's watching experts say nothing for 15 minutes.
And this is how you get people out there who just who have the middle ground position where they don't know whose side to take on this issue, because they just have people sitting there humming and hawing about how they don't know what's going on. It's like you have all the information at your fingertips. All these people know the situation, and they still won't act decisively against a terrorist organization. So that's what causes morons in the public to end up saying, well, I support Palestinian rights. Shut up. You don't know what you're talking about. If you support Palestinian rights, you should be in support of getting rid of Hamas. Daniel very racistly put on subtitles for Chantal Hubert.
Of Canada's Jewish population. You're hearing about schools being threatened, day of anger. This becomes.
Oh, she said day of anger. Good for Chantal. Point Chantal Hubert.
Or she slipped.
Yeah, she'll be taken up back and put down tomorrow, but for now, good for her.
Oh, she actually just said that. I think they're the Muslim community is taking threats from the right side.
Yeah. Oh my God. Listen, I feel so sympathetic for the Muslim people, because whenever there's an international call for jihad and people are roaming the streets looking for Jews to kill, I think of how it must be to be a Muslim at that time, because that's the real victim of the jihad against the Jewish people. When Jews have been stabbed and killed in France, and when Jewish businesses and schools are threatened and vandalized, the real victim is the NCCM.
I think that is a message that might get lost in this conflict, and I think that's a message that we all need to remember.
Yeah, and I will say that the federal and provincial ministers of public safety and justice put out a press release today saying those very things, that people need to be careful, particularly tomorrow, and that public safety is paramount in all of this. Jason.
This is a well-rehearsed, it come to be well-rehearsed arguments on either side of this issue, as this is a generations-long battle, and you have domestic populations of both Jewish, Arab, Israeli, Palestinian.
This is literally the Tim Dillon joke. It's been going on forever. It's horrible.
Let's see if he says something new.
This was the same as we've always had. I think that there were a lot of arguments. I think that's what you're hearing from Justin Trudeau and Pierre Poilievre and many other politicians, that this is different. This was honest. The attack by Hamas on Israel.
He talks like that nerdy guy from Office
Okay,
Space.
so he made a point. He's taken 2 minutes to make a singular kind of new point that's self-evident to most.
Just so massive, so brutal, that it's the point where I have family in Israel, cousins and uncle, and this is a point at which everybody in Israel pretty much knows somebody who has been killed or kidnapped or missing. And of course, I think it's worth understanding that that's also a very common experience, while maybe unfamiliar in Israel on this level, in several generations. It's a very common experience to have that intimacy with the level of human suffering in Gaza and in the West Bank. So there are huge concerns from many people, the human suffering that has been experienced and may yet be to come.
Okay, we're going to leave it there. I'm sure we'll talk about this again as things unfold. But for now, we will, when we return, we'll look at the...
Dude, how much are they? Did they cut her salary so she's decided to be even less charismatic than usual? This is like edited news, and Rosemary Barton can't keep it like a little bit more concise. Also, sorry, why is Ian Hannah-Mansing not being the commentator on her segment? We just have extra hosts for no reason.
Yeah, this is what I hate about Canada. It's like there's a new host every 5 minutes.
And we'll weigh in on the party's supply confidence agreement with the Liberals. So how important is that agreement to the NDP's success?
This is interesting because the NDP give an intervention because let's see what Calistan HQ is up to.
I like how they're like, we'll see you guys later, and then we just like literally see them next segment.
Could you imagine if one of the two of us ever was on a Rosemary Barton panel?
Yeah.
It'd be the first and last time.
For some reason, we're never invited.
Well, he might decide on Saturdays. He might. We can do it on Sunday. So the NDP is having a policy convention. I guess there's two things to flag. The first is that tomorrow starts with emergency resolutions. And interestingly enough, there were no resolutions on the Middle East that made it in their kind of vote down option to full plenary. But
that actually is a good point. They don't want the Canadian public to know what the NDP thinks about terrorism.
Well, you could also say that over the past decade, the NDP's already made its stance is extremely well known, and they're extremely pro Hamas at this point.
Yeah, I mean,
they don't really need to update it.
The Khalistani movement works hand in hand with the Muslim Brotherhood in the West. Jagmeet.
Yeah, like the only thing they could have done is pass a new resolution saying, "Are we still awful? Yes, yes, we're off."
Points of orders and personal privileges and attacking other delegates for preventing people from speaking. It's a very highly contentious issue in this party. So that is going to be the story dominating on Friday. Then on Saturday, Mr. Singh has his leadership review. He got 90.7%. The first time, 87%. Last time, nobody expects him to get the knife in his back like Thomas Mulcair.
Do it.
It's interesting because it will be the first time that the membership can weigh in on the supply confidence agreement if they decide to make that the ballot question for this leadership review.
So both of those issues.
If the NDP is smart, they have to break the NDP's long-term survival relies on breaking the Liberal NDP's coalition. I've explained it enough. I think you've heard me say how like their reputations as a party are sort of reliant on them being seen as different from each other.
But they dropped their labor base, which was like the only big difference with the Liberals.
When they saw the events last weekend, must have been not only horrified by what they saw, but with some consternation at the notion that they were just about to have a convention. And this issue to the NDP is like some social issues to the Conservatives, abortion rights, for instance. It's an issue where probably you can get a majority vote to side with whatever position, and Mr. Singh has been trying to tread a very fine line here. But what is being said about the issue will also matter, given the coverage that will be extensive on the entire issue. The other one is of more consequence to how the NDP in the House of Commons behaves. Why? Because it is in the interest of Jagmeet Singh to walk out of there with as much room to maneuver on his agreement with the Liberals as possible. And
this is just non-commentary. Like again, this is defending the party. It's a lot of deep state bullshit machinations that are going on right here.
Well, they're not even calling out the hypocrisy. They're just saying, well, his membership might want him to be supporting the Liberals less, and he'll want more. Basically, it's like, what's the point? This is something a news reporter could have said, like a normal news reporter, not a commentary person. That hey, Jagmeet Singh, because he's scared of an election, doesn't want to have an election, so he doesn't want his base to restrict what he's allowed to vote on, what he's not allowed to vote on. It's
like these are Canadian experts again. Why it's right. They take 5 minutes to make a point that if said simply and concisely could be understood by the general public, within 30 seconds.
This is
but
what,
they convolute it and put it at 5 things to confuse the average person so they can maintain this this air of intelligence and
it's
expertise.
what stupid people think is sophisticated.
Exactly.
It's just being
they razzle dazzle stupid lefties into not understanding what they're saying, and then they gain their trust because they're saying vaguely what they think. So then they're like, oh, these people are smarter than me, and therefore if they're smarter than me, they must be right because they have the same opinions. Now I am smarter.
Well, and again, why aren't we bringing up in this segment, hey, Jagmeet Singh has been throwing parental right activists under the bus for the past 6 months or so. Shouldn't that be a big issue for the party? Are they going to be talking about that? They're losing a lot of their ethnic voters who don't exactly like you attacking families, blah, blah, blah. Now we're just going to talk about the most boring issues possible. We're literally...
Sarah Jama. Okay.
Very, very wrong. This may...
I give him credit for bringing up Sarah Jama on the CBC as a Hamas supporter, effectively. Although she's an MPP in Ontario, not an MP.
No, yeah, she's provincial, not federal, but...
And, it'll be very curious to see how much, if it makes any news, if it pierces the public consciousness, it could well be on this issue.
That's actually a good point. There's the Sarah Jama thing. Will it pierce public? Having a MPP who's openly supporting murdering Jews and
I give a lot of credit to Goldie Gamari because what she has done is she said, I don't care that she tried to apologize 2 days later. Sarah Jama said what she said. She knew what she was saying, what it meant. And so so she said she still needs to be removed. And that's what people should also be doing for QP Ontario President Fred Hahn. It doesn't matter if they say, oh, of course I'm against terrorism and murder 2 days later. No, they're not. They knew they're adults. They knew what their first
their hands are twisted. Deals were made. They were promised things and said this, if you do this, we'll help you out of it.
Every government dealing with QP should just say, we're not going to deal with you until you condemn Fred Hahn and fire him. We're not going to talk to you.
I don't see the validity in that argument. I think right now they've given themselves a long leash. If there's something that they feel is a poison pill, or if there's something that they feel they can trigger an election on, they will not hesitate to do so.
That's a lie. That's a lie.
That was
a straight out lie.
She basically just said, "Well, no, actually, the what is the agreement called? Whatever. Like the coalition government between the Liberals and the NDP are a good thing, or whatever for somehow the NDP, and that's actually gives great leverage for Jagmeet. When has he ever used the leverage? He's had so many moments where he could have used it, and it wouldn't even probably triggered an election. It would have just gotten Trudeau to back off. But Jagmeet Singh is such a pathetic putz that he won't do anything.
So do they have to keep that position, or do they end up in the front facing a majority conservative government and become irrelevant in the House of Commons? Yeah. The rest, the timeline, etc. It's kind of a
to be fair, when Chantal's talking about how they can be maneuvering themselves so that they don't just end up as a third place opposition against the Conservatives in a Conservative majority government, there's nothing the NDP can do at this point to have any leverage in a new government.
Okay, well, we can all expect emails from Ed Broadbent later, is my guess. But you're allowed to disagree with anyone. That's why you're invited here. So thank you all.
No, you're not. You can have mild milquetoast disagreements where nobody actually said anything.
Thanks, Rosie. Next, an unusual theft at a BC gas station.
All right, there's a bear that robbed a gas station. That's very Canadian. We have 2 more minutes of this, but I have to go do a podcast in those 2 minutes. So we're going to conclude instead and say the bear story probably not that revelatory. I'll give him a plus on it.
Yeah, it's
so
fine.
Wyatt.
Yeah,
what's this on the Rosemary Barton scale?
This one's, I would give it a 7 out of 10.
A 7. I was thinking 7 too.
They didn't outright say Hamas was an after-school dance group or something like that. They didn't openly say Hamas is cool. They'll maybe say that today. Who knows? But it's just pablum. Watching this is just like you lose faith in Canadian legacy. Not lose faith. You lose negative amounts of faith. We did not have any before. But it's just... and again, outside of just like the way that they cover Israel specifically and some of these other issues, it's boring stories they shouldn't be reporting on. And then there's one interesting thing they report on, 1 or 2, and they repeat the story for 10 hours. Again, it was back when we were talking about the Pope and Indigenous people when I was here last year, where they just talked about the same story 4 times in a row, adding no new details. And then they'll stick a microphone in someone's face and they'll say, what do you think? Well, I think this. And then they're like, well, what do you think? And they're like, adding nothing. It's just
Yeah, in
basically
about 45
bare bones-
45 minutes of news, charitably, there was about 5 minutes of news there.
Yeah, and like and then again, if I'm paying you $1.4 billion, I should at least expect that you're going to be snappy, deliver as many stories as you possibly can. This happened. We're going to be talking about this for 3 minutes, this for 3 minutes, this for 3 minutes.
All right,
And by the
I
end,
got 1 minute
really-
here. So we're shutting it down. Thanks for watching. If you hate the CBC, please like, subscribe to the National Telegraph. Support us. We have different fundraisers, links in the description below, blah, 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 blah. And if you're watching this before Saturday, 4 p.m., October 14th, join us outside Christopher Freeland's office to protest Bill C-11 and C-18, which are designed to destroy alternative media, so you will be forced to watch the CBC without our commentary. Thank you, and good night, afternoon, morning.